Hello, it is I, Marble Duck. In every game, there have been guns which are reputed by the player base to be the best or the worst, and sometimes these perceptions can be self-sustaining, regardless of how accurate they actually are. People can use a gun because they get killed by it a bunch in-game, or because their favorite YouTubers say it's good, not necessarily because it's actually a good gun, or actually a bad gun. And because people keep using it, more people see it used. And they begin using it with the preconception of its effectiveness, and this idea self-perpetuates. Of course, the opposite happens just as easily. If someone says a gun is bad, and someone you watch on YouTube says a gun is bad, you might not use it. Or maybe if you do use it, those opinions are colored by your preconceived evaluations, leading you to find an awful gun and one that's really not all that bad, or a great gun and a weapon that's really not all that good. So we're going to be talking about the Uzi, which is still, even after the introduction of 41AE, regarded as one of the worst guns in the game. I don't think this even has a grain of truth to it. And this weapon remains my personal go-to in every single sweaty situation that I encounter. As much as I've tried to enjoy the other ARs and SMGs, I will always return to the Uzi. It's truly the only weapon which combines DPS, ranged hit rate, hipfire, and mobility into a single package that you can achieve all at the same time. A lot of guns can go for like good hit rate or good mobility, but not at the same time. The Uzi can do both. I think it's legitimately the best submachine gun in this game, if not one of the best guns, period, and I'm here to tell you why. We're going to first compare it to a couple other guns. I've chosen to look at the M4, which happens to be a benchmark in this game, and a couple of other 3-bullet kill weapons. These are the AK-47, RPK-74, and the SCAR. I'll be using the 30-round version of the SCAR for comparison's sake, just to keep ammo counts on par with the Uzi. Relative to the SCAR, the Uzi has less recoil, better hipfire, and flat-out faster handling. The SCAR H has a longer 3-bullet kill potential, well, unaffected by limbs, so that's 31 meters for the SCAR versus 23 meters for the Uzi, but shorter 3-bullet kill to the chest. So if you're hitting perfect chest shots, the Uzi actually has a longer 3-bullet kill range than the SCAR, and you can see this in the chart that I'm putting up here. However, the SCAR H has a considerably longer 4-bullet kill potential, and in this case it's infinite, and a comparable rate of fire. Now, before I show you the TTK chart that I'm going to show you, you have to understand that this is not going to factor hit rate. Anyone who has ever used the SCAR knows that by default, it is not going to hit its shots very effectively because of recoil. Even with perfect recoil control, random recoil, which is this game's form of random bullet deviation that everybody hated in Battlefield for some reason, will cause you to miss shots. Without actually having spread data, which I cannot gather at this point in time in Modern Warfare 2019, I suspect that an uninvested Uzi will still actually outperform an uninvested SCAR even after it drops to 4-bullet kills. So here's what you're seeing here. You notice that the SCAR actually has a shorter 3-bullet kill range than the Uzi. In fact, in multiplayer, I would consider the Uzi to be a better SCAR. Your handling speed is so much better, especially out of tactical sprint. It's hard to ever justify using the SCAR. You really have to invest into ADS accuracy to get good range out of the SCAR, to really use that 4-bullet kill that the damage model grants you. And at that point, it's going to be even slower than you could ever possibly make the Uzi. When comparing it to the AK-47, the Uzi has 2 extra attachments invested. In this case, for this comparison, we're looking at long barrel plus 41 AE versus naked AK. The Uzi has less recoil, better hipfire, faster handling. The AK-47 has a longer 3-bullet kill potential, which is unaffected by limbs up to 29 meters compared to the Uzi's 23 meters. And in fact, the AK actually has an infinite 3-bullet kill range to the chest, but unfortunately you never really are able to effectively use that because of the AK's recoil characteristics. The Uzi fires about 10% faster than the AK too. As a result, I don't think the AK-47 comes close to being the Uzi in real-world performance. If you actually want to make use of that 3-bullet kill that the AK has, you're going to be speccing exclusively into ADS performance, which makes your handling, which is already atrocious compared to the Uzi, even worse. It still doesn't manage to get to the levels of like no recoil that the Uzi has, even when you spec fully into like max range, max no recoil with the AK. The 6 meters extra of a 3-bullet kill is not worth it. Is simply not worth losing so much everything else that the Uzi has going for it in terms of handling. especially when by default the Uzi beats the AK by a frame in raw TTK in close quarters. Now as for the RPK-74, if we throw on the RPK barrel and the mag conversion for the AK, I'm going to be comparing it to the RPK because without the RPK barrel, the AK with 5.45 rounds isn't even going to come close to beating the Uzi's 3-hit kill range. I think it's a better comparison. Both have the same attachment investment in this case, so you have the ammo conversion for both and the barrel for both. The Uzi has less recoil, better hip fire, flat out faster handling. The RPK-74 has a longer 3-bullet kill potential, while unaffected by limbs, so that's 26 meters versus the Uzi's 23 meters. But the Uzi has a better 3-bullet kill potential to the chest, 38 meters as opposed to 35 meters. The RPK has a considerably longer 4-bullet kill, and it fires 16% faster, but once again we run into the issue of handling. RPK is 150 milliseconds slower to ADS, and its sprint out is 83 milliseconds slower. Compared to the Uzi, it's kind of hard to justify the handling of the RPK. And in terms of close quarters DPS, it's kind of a wash. RPK technically wins by a frame versus the Uzi, but it takes substantially longer to get on target from any stance. The advantage here is definitely to the Uzi. Past 38 meters, the RPK has a 2-frame advantage, but it really doesn't have the accuracy to make use of it effectively. I'd say, in general, the advantage goes to the Uzi. The M4, now, I think is the only gun in this comparison that is competitive against the Uzi. The Uzi has, again, 2 extra attachments invested. We're looking at a naked M4 here. The Uzi has less recoil, better hip fire, and faster handling. And the M4 is actually one frame slower in its time to kill, up to 38 meters. Thereafter, the M4 has 1 frame better time to kill, and it really does, unlike the other guns, have the recoil characteristics to make use of it. The Uzi is penalized more than the M4 for misses due to a lower rate of fire, but higher damage per shot, and it can't equip the huge mags that the M4 can. Once again, the Uzi does beat the M4 in terms of handling. It is 83 milliseconds slower to ADS and 83 milliseconds slower to sprint out. It also moves slower in general relative to the Uzi. It's probably better for long-range maps, the M4 is, but the Uzi is always going to be better on most multiplayer maps, if you have the aim for it. Like I said, you have 38 meters where the Uzi is just straight up better than the M4. And the M4 does have the ability to equip 60-round mags, but in this case, like I said, it's competitive. You really have to make a decision here whether you want lots of bullet, fast, doesn't need as much accuracy, or raw DPS in close quarters and the ability to have better handling and hip fire. I think it really does reflect well on this gun that what is regarded to be the best gun in this game, which is the M4, is only situationally better than the Uzi, and there's really a viable argument for both. The Grau, which I think is one of the better assault rifles, is also quite competitive relative to the Uzi, but I don't think there's a clear decision to be made here. If you spec the Grau for handling, so that's with the drifter barrel, it has a 30-meter 4-bullet kill, whereas the Uzi retains, like we've said before, it's 38-meter 3-bullet kill. If you spec for range, however, your hipfire and handling is going to be much, much worse than the Uzi. So, speaking of handling, if you go for the short barrel, its ADS time is identical compared to the Uzi, but its sprint out is still 2 frames slower. As for movement, the Grau is definitely slower at 54% move speed while strafing, whereas the Uzi is still 66% strafe speed, which can be buffed further with the strafe speed stock. Both are very competitive picks. Unlike the Uzi, the Grau can run its big mags, but it still loses to the damage output that the Uzi can provide. It has a definite clear advantage in ease of use like the M4. It doesn't have much recoil, it has a lot higher rate of fire, and has, like I said, bigger mags, and it can pick up 5.56 ammo, which is literally everywhere. And it doesn't lose its slot to the ammo conversion like the Uzi. But like I said, it doesn't have the hip fire or the damage potential that the Uzi does. When compared to the MP5 does have a 2-frame advantage within 12 meters, but this is very situational. It has a 1-frame disadvantage if you get a single limb hit with the MP5, which is all the time because of how movement is in this game. It also has substantially more recoil and worse magazine economy, even if you go for the 45-round mags. if you go for the best range improving barrel for the MP5, you'll end up with a 217 millisecond ADS time compared to the 200 millisecond ADS time for the Uzi with the long barrel. And you have identical sprint out time, so Uzi wins here. It's hard to ignore the clear advantage the MP5 has within 12 meters, but that's only if you don't hit any limbs. Outside of 12 meters, the Uzi is, without question, the clear victor. It's worth noting that the MP5 9mm drops to 6 bullet kill before the Uzi loses its 3 bullet kill. Like, literally, the MP5 needs double the bullet to kill by 30 meters. This is such a huge advantage, it's hard to ever see using the MP5 or the Uzi unless you can specifically play for sub 12 meter engagements all the time. Even then, it's really hard to see the MP5 as the clear victor just because of how susceptible it is to limb shots. The 10mm version manages to stay at 4 bullets kill until 27 meters, or 31, when you've got the monosuppressor barrel, versus the 38-meter Uzi 3 bullet kill. But the extra recoil and worse magazine economy makes it really difficult to leverage this potential. So with those comparisons established, here's my assessment of the gun in general. I think low rate of fire is always going to be punishing if your aim is bad. That's just a fact of life when you have high damage, low rate of fire. Despite this, the Uzi has such an insurmountable recoil and handling advantage over everything else that it's really hard to say that it's not good. None of the ARs can be spec'd to be as accurate or as fast handling, especially while maintaining damage, and they certainly cannot be spec'd to be as accurate and as fast handling as the Uzi can. Really, the damage models of the assault rifles are kinda useless in multiplayer. The drop-offs are so far out that, for the most part, they're meaningless on most maps. And among ARs, only the RPK-74 actually holds a meaningful raw DPS advantage over the Uzi here, and it does so at a significant handling and usability cost. Among SMGs, only the MP5 has a significant raw DPS advantage over the Uzi, but this is entirely dependent on no limb hits and engagements that are within 12 meters. Outside of those conditions, you will just straight up lose the DPS war with the Uzi. And something that I want to make clear that people don't seem to realize all the time is that damage output literally doesn't matter if you don't hit your shots. The Uzi is one of the few guns in this game that literally needs no investment whatsoever to actually realize its potential for hit rate. It's not like an AK where you have to slap on so much recoil reduction stuff that it gets even slower than it already is. It literally has 0 random recoil, and it's got a brain-dead easy pattern that might as well not even be there. If you're not hitting your shots because you're missing, that's one thing. But if you're not hitting because you can't get your weapon up fast enough, it also doesn't matter. If you have insanely quick time to kill like the Odin or the MG34, but you can't bring your gun up to shoot, they're pointless. The Odin and the MG34 are the fastest time to kill of the automatic weapons. Why are they not meta? Because lower DPS ARs can actually ADS and move faster. It doesn't matter how good your potential is if you're not hitting your shots because you're missing due to random recoil, which is a fact of this game, or you're not getting your gun up on time because your gun is so slow. The Uzi has amazing base handling, and even when you slap on all the accuracy boosting things you can possibly think of, it's still better than the assault rifles. But you don't need to, because it literally already has next to no recoil. It's amazing how good this gun is. The ARs really need to invest into ADS time to be competitive in this game. So an ADS time improving stock or stipple grip tape are basically required picks. I don't personally like the system where choosing a mag conversion reduces one of your available slots by 1 because it's effectively a different gun. But even when you assume that you only have 4 attachment slots with the Uzi, that's still more than enough to set it up with how you will need to set it up. And finally, to finish off with some of the very real drawbacks of the Uzi, it definitely has probably the worst irons in the game. So realistically, you're spending 2 slots here. You're spending 1 on an optic and 1 on a 41 AE conversion. And finally, being a rare weapon, I've maybe run into like 3 other people using it over the course of like 5,000 kills with the Uzi. You're never going to find ammo on the ground unless you're running over your own gun that you dropped when you died. So you kind of have, I always play specialist, so it's not super big deal, but you definitely have to rely on either the munitions box or the scavenger or fully loaded. I wouldn't take fully loaded even though it does give you more ammo because you don't have that. You don't have enough slots to spare to ever pick fully loaded. It has its drawbacks, but I think it's the closest thing that we have right now to a gun that is so good in every situation I might be able to call it overpowered. It straight up out DPSs this entire competition in the SMG class with the exception of the MP5 and extreme close quarters. It out DPSs every assault rifle except the Odin, but the Odin is slow as hell. It's just so amazingly good at ranges that you're going to be encountering in multiplayer matches that I can't not recommend it. So how do you set this gun up to do well with it? Part of the reason that the Uzi is so good is that you have a ton of flexibility in how you can set it up. I've got this hipfire only multiplayer setup here, which is the 41AE Mark Green Laser No Stock monosuppressor. And you can exchange the monosuppressor for an optic if you want a little bit more visibility, but a little bit less range. You lose like a meter or two off your 3-hit kill. And you're not quiet either. If you don't care about being quiet, like I said, just replace the monosuppressor with an optic. All three functional attachments, so the Merc, the Green Laser, and the No Stock, all these are the three attachments which improve your hipfire, and it really gives you an effective hipfire range of your entire 3-bullet kill range, which is beyond 28 meters. If you want a more balanced setup that's good for ADS and hipfire, I'd take 41AE Merc, Green Laser Optic, and the monosuppressor or the barrel. It's worth noting here that the barrel does make your hipfire worse. If you find yourself wanting better hipfire accuracy, switch the barrel for the suppressor. If you want better ADS accuracy, switch the suppressor for the barrel. And it really just entirely depends on whether you spend more time in ADS or hipfire. This setup has excellent recoil characteristics and should perform well on any multiplayer map. If you are on console and you can't hipfire because aim assist doesn't work from the hip, I would take the 41AE barrel commando grip rather than Merc, optic, and either the no stock or strafe stock, depending on your personal preferences, whether you want slightly more speed or slightly better recoil. This setup is going to have substantially worse hipfire than the other setups because you have the penalty from the long barrel and no real way to buff it, but it still has excellent handling relative to any assault rifle. If you're playing with keyboard and mouse and you don't use aim assist, exchange the commando grip for Merc, just for slightly better hipfire. If you find that your perceived recoil is too annoying, just switch the no stock for the strafe stock, even though the strafe stock is really ugly. If you're playing the Uzi on ground war, and yes, it totally works on ground war for long-range engagements, I would take 41AE, barrel, Merc, suppressor, and an optic. So this is pretty much the max accuracy version of the Uzi. But at the same time, unlike the AK or something, which gets even more catastrophically slow, it's still got great handling and great hipfire. Your hipfire is more than good enough for building clearing if you happen to be in close quarters, but you still have the range for the longest shots you're probably realistically going to take. Yeah, it's not going to beat LMGs outright in a 100-meter DPS fight, but unlike LMGs, you actually have the means to play aggressively. So that was my statement on the Uzi. I hope you go try it out. I find that it's an absolutely fantastic gun, and it's criminally underused for how good it is. I think the MP5 is very overrated. I think the M4 is somewhat overrated. And I think the Uzi really needs more attention.